The sky over Elithar was not like any sky humans had ever seen. Two suns bathed the planet in a pale, shifting light that changed with every hour. Elithar had been a peaceful world for thousands of years. Its cities floated above the oceans, built with shimmering crystal that reflected the colors of the sky. The Elitharians, delicate beings with translucent skin and bright, intelligent eyes, had mastered technology and art alike. They were explorers, scholars, and dreamers, yet they had never faced the kind of threat that now loomed over their world. It began with the storm. At first it was subtle. Small flashes in the sky, strange waves in the oceans, a sudden shift in the planet's gravity. Then the storm grew stronger, spreading across continents and oceans. Communication arrays, the pride of Elitharian technology, started failing one by one. Cities lost contact with one another, satellites spun uselessly in orbit. And then as the panic grew, Elithar sent a call into the dark vastness of space, a cry for help. Attention! Galactic Council, this is Elithar. We are facing a planetary catastrophe. Our cities are failing. Our people are in danger. We request immediate aid, said the voice of High Envoy Talaris, broadcast in every frequency the Elitharians could use. His words were calm but heavy with urgency. Every Elitharian within hearing distance felt the weight of desperation. For days the Elitharians waited. They monitored the empty space for signs of response. They imagined fleets of ships, fleets of allies racing to help them. Yet nothing came, not a single signal, not even an acknowledgement. The galaxy, it seemed, had sent only silence. Meanwhile, millions of light years away, humans on Earth were observing the same storm through their long-range space sensors. To humans, the storm was extraordinary, but the Elitharian distress signal was faint and strange, almost alien. Scientists in Earth's orbital research stations debated what it meant. Was it a warning, a threat, or simply a call for help from a species they barely understood? The decision was made by those who governed humanity's secret military programs. The Elitharian signal could not be ignored. Humanity had developed monsters, biomechanical soldiers, stronger, faster, and more resilient than ordinary humans. They were designed to explore hostile planets, survive extreme conditions, and protect humans from the unknown. To Earth's leaders, sending these beings to Elithar was the safest way to respond. To the Elitharians, it would be a terrifying shock. The first ships left Earth silently, carrying the monsters across the void of space. They traveled for weeks, moving through the stars with precision. The creatures inside were part human, part machine, with eyes that glowed faintly in the dark and bodies designed to endure environments that would kill ordinary beings. They were not soldiers in the usual sense. They were protectors, explorers, and guardians, programmed to prioritize survival and aid. But the Elitharians, seeing them approach from orbit, could not know that. On Elithar, the storm worsened. Talaris moved through the city of Lithera, checking each energy conduit, each stabilizer, hoping that their technology could still protect the people. The oceans were boiling in strange patterns. Waves taller than the tallest Elitharian towers crashed against floating platforms. Gravity shifted unpredictably, making the skies dangerous for anyone venturing outside. Panic had begun to spread. Elitharians gathered their children, their elderly and their injured, trying to find safety wherever they could. And then, through the swirling storms, the monsters arrived. At first it was only glimpses, a shadow here, a gleaming mechanical arm there. Elitharians stared in fear. These beings were massive, far larger than any Elitharian. Their skin was metallic and synthetic, their faces almost human but somehow alien. They moved with precision and purpose, unaffected by the storm. From the perspective of the Elitharians, it was as if the planet's own nightmare had come alive. "Do not approach," Talaris shouted, waving at the nearest monster. The creatures paused, scanning their surroundings. One stepped forward slowly. Its voice, calm and mechanical yet unmistakably human, spoke in the Elitharian tongue. "We are here to help. No harm will come to you. Please move to safe zones." For a moment, nothing happened. The Elitharians did not trust the creatures. Their eyes, wide with fear, reflected both the storm and the strange machines before them. Then slowly, a small group led by Talaris himself decided to move. They could see the monsters repairing a damaged energy conduit, stabilizing a collapsing platform. It was clear they were not here to destroy. Still, the tension was heavy. Misunderstandings could turn deadly in an instant. A sudden shift in gravity caused one Elitharian platform to tilt dangerously. A monster reacted instinctively, extending its massive arm to steady the platform. The Eleutherians gasped, terrified at the creature's strength. To them it was more destructive than helpful. Talaris had to step in, calming the crowd. "They are not our enemies," he said firmly. "We have no choice but to trust them for now." As the day turned into night and Elither's two suns dipped below the horizon, the monsters began working in earnest. They reinforced damaged buildings, stabilized the unstable ground, and monitored the storm's chaotic energy. They moved with efficiency and intelligence that the Eleutherians could only marvel at. Children peeked from hiding places, curious but cautious. Some elder Eleutherians whispered that perhaps these monsters were the answer to a prayer, even if frightening to look at. Meanwhile, Talaris contacted the Eleutherian Council, urging them to maintain patience. "We cannot fight fear with fear," he said. "If we are to survive this storm, we must learn to trust what we do not yet understand." High above, the storm raged with increasing intensity. Strange lightning arcs danced across the sky and enormous waves crashed against platforms. But through it all, the monsters moved calmly, repairing, supporting, and protecting. They were a strange sight, part human, part machine, and fully dedicated to preserving life. Inside one of the monsters, Commander Mara Vale observed the scene. Her human eyes scanned the Eleutherian population. She understood their fear. She understood how her team might be seen as monsters, though their goal was entirely different. Mara had faced danger before, but this was different. This was not just a natural disaster. It was a first encounter, a test of humanity's ability to be seen as allies rather than threats. She issued orders carefully, prioritizing protection, avoiding unnecessary force. Each monster moved with precision, anticipating dangers, reinforcing structures, and rescuing those trapped in collapsing buildings. Slowly, a small change occurred among the Eleutherians. Fear did not vanish, but curiosity began to replace terror. Some came closer, watching the monsters work. They saw acts of care, not destruction. They saw intelligence and empathy, not mindless aggression. Talaris walked among them, pointing to the monsters as they lifted a collapsed dome to free trapped citizens. "See," he said softly, "they are helping. They are not our enemies." But the storm was far from over. Elithar's skies crackled with unfamiliar energy. Gravity shifted unpredictably. Massive waves threatened entire cities, and in the distance, Talaris noticed strange anomalies, objects moving within the storm that were neither Eleutherian nor human. The sense of urgency intensified. For now, humanity's monsters were the first line of defense. For the Eleutherians, they were terrifying and awe-inspiring, and for both, the coming days would test trust, courage, and the very limits of survival. The cry for help had been answered, not by the galaxy, not by the Council, but by Earth's monsters. And in the heart of Elithar, amid the chaos of storms and fear, a fragile hope began to grow, that perhaps even the most terrifying beings could become allies, and perhaps humans, through monsters and ingenuity, were a species the galaxy had underestimated. And so, under stormy skies and flickering light, the first chapter of Elithar's survival had begun. Days passed on Elithar, and the storm showed no sign of slowing. The sky was an ever-changing canvas of violet lightning and dark swirling clouds. Oceans boiled and steamed, and the air was thick with charged energy. For the Eleutherians, life had become a constant struggle for survival, and while the monsters worked tirelessly to stabilize structures and protect citizens, fear still hung over the cities like a shadow. High Envoy Talaris moved through the city of Lithara, his calm demeanor barely masking the tension inside him. Despite the monster's assistance, every day brought new dangers. A floating platform would tilt, threatening to collapse. A sudden wave would sweep across a city district. Gravity would fluctuate unexpectedly, sending Eleutherians tumbling. He could see the uncertainty in his people's eyes. Many still whispered about the monsters that had arrived from the stars. "They are not like us," murmured Elder Leora to Talaris. "I cannot forget their eyes, the way they move. So precise, so strong. What if they turn against us?" Talaris shook his head. "They are here to help. Fear can blind us, Elder Leora. We cannot fight the storm and our own doubt at the same time." Yet fear was difficult to suppress, even as the monsters repaired buildings and rescued Eleutherian children from collapsing platforms. Every act of strength looked to the natives more like power than protection. To the Eleutherians, who were gentle and non-aggressive by nature, the size and abilities of these beings were unsettling. Meanwhile, The human commander, Mara Vale, observed from the highest vantage point she could find. Her team of monsters had adapted well to Elithar's extreme conditions, moving with calm precision. They reinforced structures with advanced materials, stabilized shifting gravity zones, and rescued those trapped by falling debris. But Mara noticed that the Elitharians were still wary, keeping their distance. She knew that fear could lead to panic, and panic could lead to disaster. One day, while inspecting a damaged city district, Mara saw a group of young Elitharians cornered by a falling platform. Without hesitation, she directed her monster to lift the debris and secure the area. The children watched, wide-eyed, as the monster moved with both strength and careful calculation. Talaris arrived moments later, reassuring the children and explaining the act. Slowly, some trust began to form. But Elithar's storm had another effect. It revealed vulnerabilities no one had anticipated. Power systems were failing faster than the monsters could repair them. Floating cities began to drift dangerously close together. Bridges snapped under the strain. Every intervention the monsters made was critical, but it could only hold the disaster at bay temporarily. One evening, as Elithar's twin suns dipped beneath the horizon, Mara called a meeting with her team and Talaris. The discussion was urgent. "The storm is changing," she said. "It's not just natural. There are patterns, energy signatures we've never seen before. We need to adapt, or the next collapse could be catastrophic." Talaris nodded. "We've survived so far because of your help. But Elithar is fragile. My people are afraid of what they do not understand. If we cannot show them that you are allies, panic will undo everything." As if on cue, a sudden quake shook the city. Gravity shifted violently, sending floating platforms spinning out of control. Elitharians screamed and clung to railings. Mara immediately gave orders. The monsters sprang into action, moving faster than the eye could follow. They stabilized platforms, caught falling Elitharians, and reinforced weakened structures. One monster, known to the team as Corin, carried a group of children to safety. The smallest one, trembling with fear, looked up at Corin's glowing eyes and whispered, You are helping." "Yes," Corin said in his calm, mechanical voice. "We are here to protect you." The child nodded slowly, and Mara allowed herself a small smile. This was the first real sign that Elitharians could begin to trust the humans. But even as trust grew among some, others remained suspicious. Rumors began to circulate that the monsters were not truly human, that perhaps they were spies or weapons sent to conquer Elithar. The Elitharian Council convened, discussing what should be done. Elder Leora spoke first. "We have seen their actions. They save lives, but they are unlike anything we know. We must remain cautious. One mistake could bring destruction." Another council member, Kether, argued, "We cannot survive this storm alone. These beings are our only hope for now. If we drive them away, we doom ourselves." Talaris listened carefully. "Both of you are correct. Fear must be balanced with reason. We must allow the monsters to help while keeping vigilance. This is our only chance." That night, the city of Lithera was quiet but not peaceful. Lightning danced across the sky, and strange tremors shook the floating platforms. Mara walked among the Elitharians, talking quietly to them, answering questions, calming fears. She began to understand the depth of their cultural differences, their caution, their patience, their need for reassurance. The monsters could perform incredible feats of strength, but trust could not be programmed. The following morning, another disaster struck. A massive wave, higher than any before, surged through a coastal city district. Buildings teetered on the edge of collapse. Elitharians panicked, unsure where to run. Mara immediately sent a team of monsters to stabilize the area. They worked in perfect coordination, lifting debris, anchoring buildings, and guiding citizens to safety. This time, a group of Elitharians followed Mara's instructions without hesitation. They helped where they could, learning from the monsters' actions. For the first time, it was not only humans protecting Elitharians. It was a small but real partnership forming in the midst of disaster. Still, the storm continued to escalate. Energy readings revealed strange anomalies moving within the clouds. Objects of unknown origin flashed in and out of view, and some of Mara's sensors detected unusual signals, not of Elitharian or human design. Something or someone was out there watching. The monsters were capable of handling the physical challenges, but this new presence brought an unknown element to the crisis. Talaris spoke to Mara privately. We are not just dealing with nature now. There is something else in this storm. Something we cannot yet understand. Your people are strong, but this may test all of us in ways we cannot imagine. Mara nodded. We will be ready. But we need more than machines. We need to show them that humanity is not here to harm them. That's the real challenge. As the day wore on, Elithar's citizens began to adjust to the presence of the monsters. Some children played near them, laughing at their mechanical arms and unusual movements. Others observed cautiously, learning from their actions. Talaris noticed the change and allowed himself a small moment of hope. Perhaps this fragile trust could grow into something stronger, something capable of facing the storm together. Yet in the shadows of the storm, the unknown signals continued. Elitharians and humans alike could sense that the worst was not yet over. For now they survived and a tentative alliance had begun, but in the heart of the storm silence remained. The galaxy had not responded. Elithar's cries for help had been ignored by distant civilizations, leaving humans and their monsters as the planet's only protectors. The Elitharians slept uneasily that night, knowing their world was in danger. The monsters stood watch silently, scanning the skies, prepared for whatever came next. Mara Vale stood at the edge of a platform, looking at the swirling clouds and thinking about the future. Humanity had sent its protectors, not fully understood, not fully trusted, but in their presence lay a promise that even in the absence of the galaxy's help, Elithar would not face its trials alone, and so life continued on Elithar, between fear and hope, chaos and courage, as the storm raged on. The first steps of trust had been taken, but the planet's true test was only beginning. The Elitharians had survived the monster's arrival. Next, they would have to survive the storm's secrets and whatever force hid within it. The storm that had gripped Elithar for weeks now seemed alive. Lightning streaked across the darkened sky in patterns that no Elitharian had ever seen. Waves rose higher than the tallest floating platforms, and gravity shifted unpredictably, throwing citizens and buildings alike into chaos. The monsters continued their tireless work, moving through the chaos with unwavering precision. Yet Mara Vale sensed that something far more dangerous was at play. From the highest platform in the city of Lithera, she studied the storm's energy signatures. The patterns were not random. They pulsed in deliberate sequences like a signal being sent. Mara's instincts told her this storm was controlled, orchestrated by an intelligence beyond Elithar. She approached Talaris urgently. "Hi, Envoy," she said, pointing to her readings. "This storm, it's not natural. Something or someone is controlling it. It's testing your planet, maybe even studying it." Talaris frowned, his calm demeanor tightening with concern. "We have endured disasters before, but this is unlike anything Elithar has faced. If your people had not arrived, we would have been lost entirely." Mara nodded. "Then we have no choice. We must act, not just survive. Your people and mine, together." That afternoon, as the storm continued to rage, strange shapes began to emerge from the swirling clouds. At first, they were distant shadows, barely visible. Then enormous ships, sleek and dark, materialized above Elithar's atmosphere. Their surfaces reflected the storm's violet lightning, making them seem almost part of the chaos itself. They were not Elitharian. They were not human. They were something new, something intelligent. Talaris called the council immediately. "These are no natural formations. They are vessels. They have come to Elithar with intent, and we must prepare for confrontation." Mara activated her monster's defensive protocols. "We don't know if they're hostile yet, but we must assume they are. Elithar's people are not ready for combat. That is where we come in." The first vessels hovered over the central city district, releasing energy pulses that caused entire platforms to tilt violently. Elitharians screamed in terror, running to hold on to anything solid. The monster sprang into action, stabilizing platforms and shielding citizens from falling debris. Corin and Sela worked side by side, lifting heavy structures and directing Elitharians to safety. Even as they worked, Mara realized that brute force alone would not be enough. The alien vessels were powerful, moving with precision, and they seemed to anticipate every action. The monster's strength could protect citizens, but it could not neutralize the threat entirely. "We need a plan," Mara said to Talaris. "Your people know the city better than anyone. They can guide us, direct the monsters, and help us protect the most vulnerable areas. We combine our abilities, we stand a chance," Talaris nodded. I will organize teams. Elithar has engineers and scouts who understand the flow of the city. Together with your monsters, we can counter the immediate danger. The council divided responsibilities. Elitharian engineers mapped areas of high risk, noting where buildings and platforms were most likely to collapse. Scouts monitored the alien vessels' movements, observing patterns in their energy pulses. Mara assigned her monsters to protect the citizens and stabilize critical structures. Slowly, a coordinated defense began to form. A combination of human strength, Elitharian knowledge, and careful planning. As the first night of the alien presence fell over Elithar, the battle for survival began. Massive energy beams from the ship struck the city, toppling floating platforms and tearing buildings apart. Elitharians ran in fear, guided by Mara and her monsters to safety zones. The monsters lifted platforms, redirected falling structures, and rescued those trapped. Yet it was more than just physical survival. The alien vessels seemed to manipulate the storm itself, shifting gravity and energy to create chaos. Mara realized that Elithar's natural defenses were insufficient. The monsters were strong, but strategy and coordination were now critical. Focus on the citizens first, Mara ordered. Stabilize platforms. Protect the vulnerable. Then we can look for weaknesses in the vessels. Karan nodded, his glowing eyes scanning the city. With precise movements, he reinforced the largest structures, holding them steady against the alien energy pulses. Sela carried groups of citizens through collapsing districts, each step measured, careful, and deliberate. The monsters were not just powerful, they were intelligent, adaptive, and capable of understanding strategy. In the city's council chamber, Talaris directed Elitharian engineers to set up temporary energy shields across vulnerable platforms. The shields pulsed with Elitharian technology, designed to absorb and redirect the alien energy. Mara watched as humans and Elitharians worked side by side, combining skills in a way neither species could have imagined before the storm. As dawn broke, Mara realized that the aliens were not invincible. Their vessels moved predictably when energy pulses were directed back at them. The monsters and Elitharians began to notice patterns. Every time the alien ships fired a beam, a nearby platform or structure became unstable, creating a predictable chain reaction. This is it, Mara said. If we can redirect their energy pulses, we can protect the city and perhaps force them back. The monsters moved quickly, reinforcing structures at key points, absorbing energy pulses and guiding Elitharians to safety. The alien vessels fired repeatedly, but each time the coordinated defense mitigated the damage. Citizens began to see the monsters not as threats but as protectors. Children pointed in awe as massive arms lifted collapsing platforms. Adults followed instructions to secure weaker structures, learning the value of cooperation. Even Elder Leora, once skeptical, acknowledged the monster's role. They are not our enemies, she said quietly to Talaris. They are our strength when we had none. By midday, the tide of the battle shifted. The coordinated efforts of humans and Elitharians began to force the alien vessels to retreat. Mara directed monsters to target weak points in the alien energy pulses, while Elitharian engineers amplified their shields to redirect incoming beams. The city remained unstable, but the citizens were safe and the aliens were losing ground. Finally, after hours of struggle, the alien vessels began to withdraw. Mara watched as the last ship vanished into the storm, leaving behind a battered but alive Elithar. Citizens cheered cautiously, still shaken but grateful. The monsters stood silent, scanning for any remaining threats. Talaris approached Mara, relief evident in his eyes. Your people, your monsters, they have saved Elithar. I do not know if the galaxy will ever recognize this, but my people will never forget it. Mara allowed herself a small smile. It was not just the monsters. It was the Elitharians, too. Without their knowledge, their guidance, we could not have done it. Together, we made it through. For the first time since the storm began, Elithar felt a moment of peace. The cities were damaged, but survivors were safe. The monsters, once feared as terrifying beings, were now celebrated as heroes. Elitharians cautiously approached them, some offering thanks, others simply watching in awe. But Mara knew the fight was far from over. The storm, though diminished, still raged at the edges of the planet. And the alien vessels, though retreating, had demonstrated that Elithar was being observed, and perhaps targeted. Humans and Elitharians had survived today, But the real test was whether they could stand together against threats the galaxy had ignored for so long. That night, Mara walked among the Eleutherian citizens, listening to their stories of survival. Children spoke of the monsters with wonder, and adults expressed gratitude and respect. Talaris joined her, looking up at the stormy sky. "The galaxy sent silence," he said softly. "But your people, they sent monsters, and in doing so, they became our allies, our protectors, and perhaps our greatest hope." Mara nodded, understanding the truth in his words. Humanity had sent its creations, beings that seemed terrifying at first. But through courage, intelligence, and empathy, they had shown that even the most frightening appearances could hide heroes. Eleuthar had been saved not by distant powers, but by the unlikely alliance between humans and Eleutherians. And as the storm slowly faded into twilight, a fragile hope grew stronger, that together, species could survive what the galaxy ignored, face what others feared, and rise stronger than ever before. The storm on Eleuthar had reached a new level of intensity. Waves taller than any Eleutherian had ever seen crashed against floating platforms, tearing through buildings and scattering debris. The sky, once a serene dance of two suns, now roiled with dark clouds and flashes of violet lightning. Gravity shifted unpredictably, and entire city districts seemed to drift as if the world itself were losing balance. The Eleutherians, fragile and gentle by nature, struggled to survive. The monsters, however, moved through the chaos with calm precision. Towering and biomechanical, part human and part machine, they lifted massive platforms, reinforced buildings, and guided terrified citizens to safety. Their glowing eyes scanned the horizon for danger, and their hands, strong yet precise, acted with both strength and care. To the Eleutherians, it was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. High Envoy Talaris walked alongside Commander Mara Vale, observing the disaster. "They are helping," he said quietly. "But my people still fear them. Their power is too much for us to understand." Mara nodded. "I know, they are not just strong, they are efficient. But efficiency looks like threat when it is not explained. We need to show them why we are here, not just what we can do." Despite Mara's efforts, the city was on the brink of panic. Gravity shifts caused floating platforms to collide, and buildings teetered on the edge of collapse. Eleutherians ran through the streets, attempting to save what they could. Some were brave, trying to help stabilize smaller structures, but many froze in fear at the sight of the monster's enormous forms. Suddenly, a massive wave surged through a lower city district, sweeping away an entire neighborhood. The monsters reacted immediately. One of them, Corin, extended his massive arms to hold a platform steady, while another, Sella, carried citizens to safety. They worked in perfect coordination, yet the Eleutherians still screamed in terror. Their natural instinct was to run, not to trust these enormous beings, no matter how careful they were. Talaris raised his voice, shouting instructions to his people. "Do not fear. They save lives. Follow their guidance." Slowly, some Eleutherians began to act. They assisted the monsters in clearing debris, holding cables steady and helping their neighbors climb to safety. For the first time, cooperation became visible, a fragile bridge forming between two very different species. Meanwhile, Mara observed another problem. The storm's energy seemed to be growing stronger in one sector of the city. Floating platforms were being pulled toward each other by unusual gravitational shifts, and the electricity in the air sparked uncontrollably. "We need to stabilize that area immediately," she said, pointing to the northern district. "If those platforms collide, it will cause a chain reaction." The monsters moved swiftly, each following Mara's careful instructions. They anchored massive structures with high-strength cables, redirected unstable platforms, and created safe paths for Eleutherians to evacuate. Yet even as they worked, the Eleutherians' fear persisted. A young Eleutherian named Lyra, only 12 years old, clutched her mother's hand tightly. She stared at Corin with wide eyes trembling. "Mother, what are they?" she whispered. "They are helpers," her mother said hesitantly. "I think they are here to protect us, Lyra. We must trust them." Lyra watched as Corin lifted a massive bridge carrying dozens of Eleutherians across a dangerous gap. She could not help but feel awe, even as her heart raced with fear. As the monsters continued their work, Mara noticed that the storm's anomalies were not random. Strange energy signatures flickered within the clouds, moving as if guided by intelligence. Objects shifted in ways that defied natural physics. It was clear that the storm was not purely natural. Something or someone was influencing it. "High Envoy," Mara said, approaching Talaris. "These anomalies, they're not just the storm. Someone or something is controlling it. We need to prepare for more than just environmental hazards." Talaris frowned. "Then we must protect my people and learn what we are up against. Elithar has never faced a threat like this, and we cannot rely on the galaxy. It has not answered our cries." That night, the monsters continued their patrols. They moved silently across floating platforms, scanning for hazards and assisting citizens. Some Elitharians began to follow them, cautiously learning from their actions. Children peered curiously at the monsters, marveling at their strength. Some adults, however, whispered doubts and fears, unsure whether these beings were truly allies. Mara convened a small meeting with Talaris and a few trusted Elitharian engineers. "We must find a way to stabilize the city until the storm subsides," she said. "But we cannot just rely on brute force. We need strategy, coordination, and trust." One engineer, Finar, spoke cautiously. "I see their actions, Commander. They are strong, yes, but they do not understand our ways. Our cities are delicate. Their strength could damage them if they act without care." "Exactly," Mara said. "That's why we need a partnership. We must combine human strength with Elitharian knowledge. Only then can we survive." The following morning, disaster struck once more. Gravity shifted violently in the central district, causing buildings to tilt and sway. Elitharians froze in panic. Mara and the monsters reacted immediately. They anchored buildings with cables, stabilized floating platforms, and guided citizens to safety. This time, some Elitharians joined in, following Mara's instructions. Together, humans and Elitharians worked side by side, creating temporary shelters and reinforcing structures. Slowly, understanding began to grow. The Elitharians could see that the monsters were not here to harm them. They were here to save lives. But the storm was not finished. Mara's sensors detected movement within the clouds, something approaching the planet, moving with intelligence. The monsters scanned the skies, their glowing eyes alert. "Talaris," Mara said urgently, "there is something in the storm. We need to prepare your people." "It may be dangerous," Talaris nodded gravely. "Then we must teach them to stay calm, to follow guidance. Panic will destroy more than the storm ever could." As the day wore on, the Elitharians and monsters faced a series of smaller disasters: collapsing platforms, electrical surges, and gravitational anomalies. Each time, the Elitharians learned to trust the monsters a little more, observing their actions and understanding their intent. Children began to follow them. Adults assisted in stabilization efforts, and even elder Leora began to see the value in their presence. By evening, the storm had reached its peak. Massive lightning bolts struck across the city. Waves crashed over platforms and floating buildings swayed dangerously. Elitharians clung to railings and each other, terrified. But the monsters moved with unwavering precision, keeping citizens safe. In the midst of the chaos, Mara saw a small group of Elitharian children trapped on a tilting platform. Without hesitation, she directed Korin and Sela to rescue them. They moved with careful precision, lifting the children one by one and setting them down on stable ground. Lyra, the young girl who had first been so afraid, watched in awe as the monsters worked. She stepped forward cautiously, offering to help guide the youngest children. Talaris watched silently, a small smile on his face. Trust was growing, slowly but surely. Humans were no longer just monsters in the Elitharians' eyes. They were protectors, teachers, and allies. As the storm raged on, Mara realized that survival depended on more than strength. It depended on understanding, patience, and partnership. The Elitharians had learned to adapt, to trust in beings unlike themselves. And the monsters, despite their imposing appearance, had learned to work with a species far gentler than humans, respecting their ways and culture. But the storm's anomalies continued to flicker in the clouds, mysterious and intelligent. Mara knew that this was only the beginning. Something or someone was testing Elithar. Humans and Elitharians had survived the first real challenges, but the planet's true trial lay ahead. And so, amidst the chaos and growing partnership, a fragile hope took root. Elithar had monsters among them. Not threats, but allies, and together they might just survive the storm. The storm over Elithar had finally begun to fade. The violet lightning had subsided, the violent waves had calmed, and gravity shifted gently, returning the planet to a semblance of normalcy. Elithar's twin suns rose over the floating cities, casting warm light on the battered but surviving structures. For the first time in weeks, Elitharians could look around and breathe without fear. Yet the aftermath of the disaster was clear. Entire city districts had collapsed, floating platforms were damaged, and power grids were severely weakened. The people of Elithar moved cautiously through the streets, checking on neighbors and assessing the damage. But amid the destruction, something remarkable had occurred. Trust between humans and Elitharians had grown, and a fragile partnership had been born. Commander Mara Vale walked through Lithara with High Envoy Talaris by her side. Monsters, once terrifying in appearance, now moved calmly among the citizens, assisting with rebuilding efforts. Korin lifted heavy beams into place. Sela helped families reconstruct their homes, and others cleared debris with precision and care. Children followed them curiously, asking questions and mimicking their movements. "You've done more than save us," Talaris said quietly. "You've taught my people that strength can protect, not destroy. That courage can be gentle and power can be used wisely." Mara nodded. "It was never just about strength. It was about understanding. Your people taught us patience and care. Together we made it through." The Elitharian Council convened to discuss the future. The leaders spoke of rebuilding cities, restoring technology, and strengthening defenses. But they also spoke of something more important: gratitude and recognition for humanity's role. Elder Leora addressed the assembly. "We feared them at first," she said, gesturing toward the monsters working outside. "We thought them terrifying. But we have learned that appearances can deceive. Humans sent us their creations, and these monsters, these protectors, saved our people. We are in their debt, and we must honor that." The council decided to work closely with the humans and monsters. Shared knowledge would help Elithar rebuild stronger than before. Elitharians taught humans how to navigate the floating cities, stabilize platforms, and understand the delicate balance of their world. In return, humans shared advanced technology, methods for disaster management, and their experience in strategic planning. As the day continued, Mara watched children playing near the monsters. One young Elitharian, Lyra, approached Sela, touching the metallic arm carefully. "You saved us," she said shyly. "Thank you." Sela's glowing eyes softened. "It is our duty." "We are here to protect always," Lyra smiled. "Then you are our heroes." The word spread quickly. Elitharians began to view the monsters not as terrifying beings, but as symbols of courage and hope. Adults started assisting in the rebuilding process alongside humans, learning new methods and sharing ideas. What had begun as fear transformed into respect and admiration. Mara coordinated with Talaris to set up training programs. Elitharians learned emergency response techniques, working alongside monsters to prepare for any future disasters. Humans adapted their technology to work in harmony with Elitharian systems, creating a network of safety measures that combined the strengths of both species. Meanwhile, distant scanners detected no immediate threats in the skies. The alien vessels had retreated, and the storm had dissipated. Elithar was safe for now, but Mara knew that vigilance would always be necessary. "The galaxy ignored your cries," she said to Talaris one evening, watching the calm seas below. "But humanity sent its protectors. We may not be the only allies you'll ever need, but we've shown that cooperation can survive even the worst storms." Talaris smiled faintly. "You've proven that humans are a species to be respected, not just for their strength, but for their wisdom and courage. Perhaps the galaxy has underestimated you all." Days turned into weeks, and Elithar slowly healed. Cities were reconstructed with stronger foundations, floating platforms stabilized, and energy grids restored. Elitharians began to venture into areas previously damaged, learning to trust their new allies and marvel at their abilities. Monsters continued their work, not as soldiers, but as helpers and teachers. They assisted in engineering projects, demonstrated rescue techniques, and shared strategic knowledge with Elitharian engineers. Children began training under their supervision, learning how to stay calm in emergencies and how to assist others. One evening, as the twin sun set, Mara gathered her team and Talaris for a final inspection of the central city district. The damage had been repaired, the citizens safe, and the city stronger than it had been before the storm. She looked at the monsters around her, Karan, Sela, and others, and realized how far they had come. Once feared as terrifying creations, they were now heroes, trusted and respected. "We've done it," Mara said quietly. "Not just survived, but built something stronger. Elithar is safe, and your people have shown what courage and cooperation can achieve." Talaris placed a hand on her shoulder. "And we will not forget. Humanity and Elithar, your monsters, have forged a bond that the galaxy cannot ignore. Your actions have saved lives, taught us strength, and given hope where there was none." The monsters stood silently, their glowing eyes reflecting the twilight sky. They required no praise, no reward. Their purpose was protection, and they had fulfilled it. Yet Mara knew that their presence had changed Elithar forever. The planet's citizens had learned that appearances can be deceiving, that strength can protect, and that cooperation between species can achieve miracles. That night, Elithar's skies were calm. The storm had passed completely, leaving a sense of peace over the planet. Citizens returned to their homes, families reunited, and children slept safely under the watchful eyes of monsters patrolling the streets. For the first time in weeks, Elithar could rest. In the following days, humans and Elitharians worked together to establish permanent bases and training centers. Knowledge sharing became a daily practice. Elitharians learned human strategies for disaster response, while humans absorbed Elitharian techniques for stabilizing floating cities. The alliance was growing stronger with each passing day. Mara stood on a high platform, watching the sun rise over the reconstructed city. Koran and Sela worked nearby, lifting beams and assisting citizens with quiet efficiency. Lyra ran past, laughing as she followed the monster's movements, learning through play and observation. Mara allowed herself a small smile. Humanity had sent monsters, but in doing so, they had given Elithar hope, courage, and a lasting alliance. Talaris joined her on the platform. "You have changed Elithar," he said softly. "Not just with strength, but with example. Your people and your creations have proven that even in the darkest storms there is light to be found." Mara nodded. "It was never just the monsters. It was our willingness to understand, to cooperate, and to protect. Elithar's people showed courage too. Together we survived." High above the floating city, the skies cleared completely. The stars shone brightly, and distant galaxies seemed to stretch endlessly into the void. Mara and Talaris looked at each other, understanding the unspoken truth. Elithar had survived because humanity had sent what seemed like monsters, but they were symbols of hope, courage, and unity. And in that moment, as the city thrived, the storm's memory fading into the past, Elithar learned a lesson that would endure for generations. That the galaxy may remain silent, that threats may come without warning, but together, humans, Elitharians, and monsters alike, they could survive, thrive, and rise stronger than ever. The monsters had come as strangers, terrifying and unknown. They remained as heroes, allies, and teachers. Elithar was no longer alone, and humanity had proven that even the most unlikely of beings could become the greatest protectors of life in the galaxy. And so, Elithar looked to the future with hope. The bond between humans and Elitharians was no longer fragile. It was strong, lasting, and capable of facing whatever challenges the stars might send next.